Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new week. We have 7 handpicked topics for you, ranging from quality scorecards, getting called out as compliance theater, gamification, motivating agents or insulting them, offshore support being reshaped by the same technology that was supposed to threaten it, while customers are fighting harder than ever to reach a human. And to close it all out, we'll be stepping outside of the industry entirely to talk about LeBron and where he may actually be heading. I'm your host, Cameron Liss, and this is The Rundown. Today's conversation includes Michael Tamer, CEO of Proponisi and author of The 4 Minute Customer, and Scott Thomas, our CTO and technical mastermind. Between the two of them, you get the strategy and the systems, which is exactly what today's lineup needs. Let's go ahead and get into it. Our first topic is Scorecard Theater. Most centers score a tiny sample of calls weeks after they happen, delivering feedback in monthly sessions and watch the same errors repeat over and over. Behavioral science says feedback that's delayed barely works, yet the scorecard ritual survives every technology cycle untouched. So the question that stems is, does traditional QA scoring actually change agent behavior, or is it compliance theater? Michael, what are your thoughts?
The answer is yes. It can change agent behavior, and yes, it is compliance theater. Anything that's not done immediate or not done very close to when the actual event occurs is almost impossible. And imagine being taught how to play golf, and then somewhere 3 weeks later, somebody actually checks and see how you've done and see whether you've been able to understand or learn the lessons that have been given. So I think we also have a tendency to get stuck in this whole compliance route, which is that we know that it's something that needs to be done. It's something that needs to be checked because, again, in the old world, I won't say today's world, we're only doing 3 or 4 or 8 or whatever it is a month, and we're first looking for those big issues, right? The ones that get someone off the phone, the ones that can literally get us in big trouble, either legally or financially. And so the premise has been we need to make sure we're not missing something. They're trying to catch the one. And as a result of that's what the focus is. But if we're truly doing it to try to change agent behavior, then just like customer words, which again is another area that we have a tendency to wait too long to give to them, the scorecard has to be delivered quickly, because then it's something that the agent can remember. It's something that they can actually change. So I think the answer to the question is yes, but we can do so much better by being so much more prompt about it. And obviously, when we go to 100%, then we really have truly accurate data that we can really move on.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I like the way that you preface that it is a mix of both, but can also still be important. And then hitting the nail on the head by mentioning it's most important while it's still top of mind for the agent side. I feel like that's when the biggest impression is made through the coaching and anything that comes from the feedback itself. And Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Michael. And, unlike fine wine, I don't think an important message gets better over time. So clearly, getting information to agents in a timely manner about their performance is important. And, if you think about it, most contact center agents probably get zero feedback on a regular basis. I mean, call centers are busy. Contact center supervisors are overwhelmed a lot of times, and there's an alarm or a whistle or a bell that goes off anytime someone does something wrong in a contact center. But rarely is there something that's letting you know of all the great things most employees do. So, it's a great tool for, your documentation, tracking your compliance, and having a historical record and looking at that data over time. And when I've talked to agents, they really appreciate 100% of their calls being evaluated, because when they look at their scores, or can even self-diagnosed and coach themselves just by looking at the data of what are they struggling with, what do they need help with, they appreciate having that bigger snapshot. And at the end of the day, AI is going to be able to do things that a supervisor could never do as a coach, like tell an agent when they've hit their perfect 100th CSAT score, or if they've, on St. Patrick's Day, how many people did they talk to named Patrick? So those are some interesting side benefits of AQM, along with, the scorecard tracking all the important things and the things you need to know.
Yeah, completely agree. And I love that you mentioned the fact of kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly. I feel like a lot of companies focus on the bad and the ugly because that is important and where compliancy can become an issue, but also the good, when your agents do a good job on the phone, giving those kudos and those shout outs and keeping them on that level to motivate and stay on top of it, can drive retention levels and keep people around and have them doing a better job. So a great point to have made. And going from scorecards, shifting into a similar topic, the Philippines panic. Outsourcing is roughly 8% of Philippine GDP and employs well over a million people. Studies have warned a large share of those tasks are automatable. Yet BPO revenues keep growing as AI creates new work like models, model training, and exception handling. Melina is either the next Detroit or the next Bangalore. So the question is, will AI gut the Philippine BPO industry within a decade? Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, for an industry that's supposedly dying, that just broke 40 billion in revenue and hit record headcount. I mean, it's kind of sort of too far off for a model to predict so much doom. I think AI is able to help offshore companies in how they can, present scripts and translate languages and even address confusing dialects or things that are hard sometimes for the customers to understand. But I mean, I think Michael has said this before, and hopefully he's not going to say it today, but he's talked about how the ATM never killed the bank. The iPhone kind of killed the bank teller. But the whole question is which one AI turns out to be. And I think it's too early to say. I think it's more useful and helpful, and some will call for the bots and think the bots are the best thing to do. But if you look at what clients actually pay BPOs today, the complex, the regulated 2 a.m. exception, it gets harder and harder for the AI to handle those kind of things. And um, I think the BPO that outsells with AI in the stack and humans in the exceptions is probably the way the industry will be headed.
Yeah, and I love the analogy you made, making sure that, the AI, how it's leveraged is really the key focus, right? Not necessarily what exactly it's going to disrupt, but what is it going to change operationally and what that looks like in the bigger picture. And Michael, I'd love to hear your thoughts, unless Scott just stole your analogy you were going to run with there.
Well, I just appreciate the fact that he used my name in his response,
Of
so
course,
I'll
of
take that
course.
as a plus. So, I don't think the AI is going to gut the industry, but AI is definitely going to gut a lot of the tasks in the industry. And and obviously it's after the simpler, and I don't say that disrespectfully, right? IVRs have been gutting the industry for a long time because it's been taking the simpler calls, and I think AI is going to do a better job of it, and we're going to have a new definition of simple. And of course, that big transition is when it goes to making a decision, right? Rather than just functionally doing something. And so it is going to go after the test, but I also think it's going to create some new jobs as well. And I think it remains to be seen. As far as the BPO industry, there's the old adage that it's not an old adage, I guess it's actually true, right? Sharks that don't move die, right? So the BPOs are going to have to adapt. They're going to have to change, and they're already doing that. And as Scott said, there's so many of them out there, and they continue to grow. I think that we have an insatiable appetite for customer service and getting some sort of support. And today we're doing that through so many different avenues and so many different customer touch points. I think we'll just add more, and there'll be more opportunity. And those that are smart enough to take advantage of it and recognize what it does. And what I have said multiple times is that the end solution has to be faster, better, and cheaper for the customer, for the company, and for the frontline rep. And if we hit all three of those, then they'll win, and the industry will thrive and it'll grow. Otherwise, AI will just end up being a big mistake that just looks like an IVR. So there you go.
Well, and funny enough, the mention on IVR is actually segueing perfectly into our next topic. But I think before we get there, a big focus is what you mentioned is the adaptation importance of the AI era. Everyone is focused on the negatives and or the positives, but I think the real takeaway is what is going to change operationally, and the companies that can do the most with that and shift accordingly are going to be the ones that succeed in the long run. But moving on to our third topic, which I think will resonate with many, is the IVR Exorcism. Press 1 for billing menus have tortured customers for 30 plus years. Natural language voice AI can now route and resolve without a single menu. Adaptation is exploding, but a deterministic tree never hallucinates, and at least everyone knows how to fight one. So the question is, should the traditional phone tree be killed outright in favor of conversational AI? Michael, what do you think?
Well, first of all, what I think is I hate the phone tree, as does most people on the planet. And I don't think I've ever heard a customer say, man, I wish I could have 7 options rather than 6 touch tone options on every call. So yes, I think it's going to replace all the horrible ones. But I also think that there's some instances where it's more efficient, and it might be quicker to just do that because it allows us to work through a prompt quickly. So I know I sound like a broken record, but is it faster, better, and cheaper? And if it is, then we'll continue to have some phone trees that are a lot shorter, but are more effective, more efficient. So we don't need to make a lot of decisions because it's very, very focused. But I do think in the long run, people don't hate the IVR when they get to the very last step, which is the one that actually allows them to accomplish what they need to accomplish. It's the getting there. So I think a lot of them will be killed, and a lot of them, and many of them will stick around because they're just simple and they're straightforward. So phone trees, please go away as many as you possibly can, and we'll hold on to some of the smaller ones.
Yeah. And I recently read a interesting post by somebody on LinkedIn sharing that the customer doesn't understand the siloed operations within, the routing or their journey when they make a call. All they really care about is their resolution, right? So whatever we can identify to get them there as quick as possible, being faster, better, and cheaper should, be the outright goal, I think, for everybody. And Scott, what do you think about the phone tree? Are you constantly yelling for representative whenever you're having to call in somewhere?
Yeah, I really like the title IVR Exorcism because I get lost in a decision tree and I feel a lot like Linda Blair. My head is spinning like crazy and I'm, ready to do some damage. So, I mean, I've definitely fired a company because of their IVR, just not wanting to deal with it. And I agree with a lot of what, Michael said. I think, there's risk where if there's no fallback mechanism or some options that can have the customer make a choice in a decision tree like manner so that it's clear and clearly selected, combined with conversational AI, I think is generally what's going to be the best bet and the best experience for customers, and still making sure you've got that accuracy. I think you'll see some improvements in the decision tree or in the conversational AI where it's not just a guide, driving you on your journey to get to where you want in the IVR to make decisions. It should, skip right to it. It should make it an easy conversation. And quite honestly, it should have some, additional actionable capabilities where it could possibly demonstrate empathy. It could possibly upsell. It could maybe even offer to help, or is there anything else that it could help them with before they hang up, and try to drive down any kind of second calls or third calls coming into the agents. And ultimately, I think the handoff, if they do come out of the IVR to speak with an agent, the other really terrible part of going through a messy IVR is when you end up needing an agent. The agent says, "So what are you calling about today?" And there's no context coming out of that IVR. And I think AI could push that out. And then I think, there's already Just Answer the Phone, I think, is the company where, they're charging a premium to not even have an IVR. And that's obviously not going to scale or work with anyone, but it becomes kind of a bespoke product in the world of AI. So that's another thing I think you'll see.
Yeah, and I really like the mention of kind of dressing the IVR up, not necessarily taking it out, but adding and building it out to, enhance that customer journey or to get them where the resolution can be handled promptly. That way, obviously if they have a rough time through the IVR, the start of that conversation with the agent, especially if they're asking why they're calling, is probably going to lower your customer satisfaction scores off the rip. And then your agent is really being heavily relied on to deliver that empathy or those, talking skills to get them back on track and to be able to help them out. And mentioning customer journey transitions and segues us into our next topic, which is churn alarm. Predictive churn models flag at-risk customers from usage and interaction signals, triggering preemptive offers and outreach. Done well, it feels like great service, but done poorly, and it feels like your provider read your diary and discounts train customers to threaten leaving. So the question is, should companies intervene when AI predicts a customer is about to leave before the customer says anything? Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, at face value, when you hear this, you think, it's like a magic crystal ball and that AI is predicting the future and, reading our minds. But at the end of the day, it's just pattern math on different signals and different data you're collecting, and whether the client's, usage is dropping off or they're having more support contacts or different things like that. And then the models, using some algorithm and weighing out those thousands of customers who had already left and maybe trying to say, 70 or 80% component of being able to predict. But I know there's a stat I recently saw that 63% of companies running churn models see zero improvement in retention. So I don't know if we're just building an alarm system without a fire department, but that's kind of what it feels like. And then the proactive piece is a little intrusive, in my opinion. I mean, nobody really knows what I'm thinking, and it could be my first call and my first experience that would, help me make a decision to leave a company. So I think it's a little risky to push things out too quickly. I think the more important thing would be, you know, you fix what's wrong, you take care of issues, you make sure the customer's experience is good and that the issue's resolved. And when you see these little flags, you weave those into different nudges or slight information and prompts you can send to the customer rather than just immediately making the decision that they're at risk and throwing a whole bunch of effort to keep them at, or throwing a bunch of effort at them to keep them.
Yeah, and I could definitely see where, it could come across if it was your first time reaching in and they're already offering you discounts or trying to keep you as a client when you haven't even had a chance to state where you're at in the operation. I think the issue runs into having that data or using the data, right? When you can present, maybe they've been utilizing the system less often in the last 3 to 6 months, then you can present that as an opportunity to visit and have that conversation. But just taking that and running with it as, okay, well, we can offer you a discount, or, we know we're kind of anticipating you're leaving. I think that is where kind of that can fall and be a little bit harmful, right? And
Yeah, no,
Michael,
I just
go
want
ahead.
that just made me think. I think you kind of want to predict quietly, but help loudly. Would kind of be
Yeah,
the way I'd look at it.
I love that. And Michael, what do you think?
I think it start with, let's make the distinction between concern and creepy, right? So concern is that I think they're gonna, I think they're gonna churn, and creepy is, I know where your kids go to school, right? So
Yeah.
there's a point at which you don't want to do that. And since Scott brought up Linda Blair in the last one, I had to have my own creepy component in there as well.
I like that.
The cost of acquisition is so high that I don't fault these companies at all for trying to hold on to their customers. And the thing that AI brings is it keeps the stuff from falling through the cracks, which has always been the problem. And this is an analogy, but we've seen it all the time, and that is that you do a post contact survey, and the question is, do you ask the question, is it, do you want somebody to call you back? And most companies don't do that because they don't have the resources necessary to actually call them back. So they're afraid to do it. And if they do allow the client to put the number in there and then they don't ever get to them, it's even worse.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that's just 5 or 10% of the calls, or whatever their survey responses are. Maybe it's 30%. And then you're getting a smaller percentage that actually needs some sort of follow-up support. So this is a circumstance which is the beauty of AI, is that we now actually know how many might actually be at risk. And there's obviously going to be levels of how at risk they are. So companies that can build good process, and, that allows them to go after and follow up and then get a return, as Scott says, that I actually know that it did save retention, whatever that level of depth is that they can go for it, man. They should do it. If AI can help them do it and they can actually fulfill it on the back end, all for it, wonderful. And it will return and they will be able to measure it. A vendor's ability to be able to prove it, which is something we spend a lot of time focused on, which is hey, we've made this change. It is productive. It's given you a result, and we can prove that it gave you a result. This churn fits into that category as well. So I'm all for them doing as much as they can, as long as they can get a return and prove it as well. And it's not creepy. Let's make sure it's not creepy.
Yeah. And I think that's the main focus, making sure you can identify it without being creepy or overstepping.
Something we can all agree with.
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page there. I love it. And then moving on to another one, which I think is going to be highly resonated with a lot of the people, is the hang-up economy. Regulators have gone after cancellation mazes with click-to-cancel rules, and journalists keep exposing brands that bury their phone numbers and dead-end their IVRs. Companies call it channel steering, while the customers are calling it what it is. So the question is, are companies deliberately making it hard to reach a human? Scott, or Michael, I'm sorry, we'll start with you on this one. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I love going second because then I can just add on to the brilliance that is Scott. So they are absolutely unequivocally, without a shadow of a doubt, making it difficult to reach a human. And it doesn't matter which particular company it is. I guess it doesn't hurt to say it. I mean, try to get hold of somebody at Hertz, where you're a gold or executive gold or whatever their top level is. It's hard. And the telltale sign is when you just can't find a phone number. And that phone number could be going to an AI or could be going to an IVR, and then you have to work your way to a human. But they don't even provide the phone number. They want to force you to some other channel. So they are making it very hard to do. Whether that's wise or not, these are big companies that do a lot of research, and they must have decided that ultimately customers don't care. I know personally I do, and I want to be able to get to someone in some form, and don't even mind paying for it, quite frankly. But when there is no out and there's nowhere to go and you feel lost, it's very hard as a consumer not to take that as they don't really care about me. They certainly don't care about me enough to get me, to get me to a human, or at least give me some sort of a way to do that. So yes, they're doing it. Do I think they should? No. As a consumer and no as a vendor, we provide a way for all of our clients to be able to get to us. When you're talking about millions and millions of customers, somebody's got some sort of a model that I'm sure they've run through AI that makes it legitimate. I do scratch my head when I think about why they're doing it, but certainly people are doing it for sure.
Yeah. And I think we'd all be in agreement here that it is that when we're bring up the conversation of acquisition, retention, when people have that bad experience, it's the first thing they're going to talk about when they're speaking on that company. And then the vice versa side of it, where when they have a great experience, even if they are terminating their subscription, but they'll be happy to make a recommendation or state why they left, as opposed to, oh, well, I went to leave and then it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, or most difficult task to accomplish. So, and I just recently had that with myself. And it's funny, it seems more often than not, it is the smaller subscription-based companies that get away with it more. Mine was a company that scouts for electric contracts that will beat your current contract, and it's a lump sum, small amount of money a month. So I put it in the back of my mind. But then as I told it up how much of the subscription I've been paying, and I was like, well, I'm not using this. Let me go cancel it. And then it's just it's been weeks now. I've been trying to get in Tim to contact anybody that could help me out, and now I'm stuck paying another month of it. So it is interesting. And Scott, have you had a similar situation?
Yeah, I definitely have. And, I can understand the logic behind a customer doing this. If you look at the Gartner math, a live call is about $13.50 and self-service is $1.84. So, I mean, that's, I'm sure, a big contributor to it. And I also had noticed recently that Amazon Prime settled for $2.58 billion in a lawsuit over its Prime cancellation maze, which you were just going through. Internally, was codenamed Project Iliad, and so there's a lot of this happening. I know even back in the day, I don't want to date myself too much, but trying to cancel AOL back in 2006, you were still experiencing a situation like this. And so it's nothing new, but it certainly does seem to be a, a process where smart routing is just not happening. And, there's got to be an intentional design to create friction for customers to just hang up or give up with certain decisions. But, if you really think about it, if there's no KPI in place or no people are really looking at, measuring how effective their routing is and how easy it is to handle a person, they probably aren't thinking about it or caring about it the way we do other service levels in a contact center. And I just think, it's something that is probably going to become more regulated over time. But there's really no excuse, especially with the way AI can certainly help in scenarios like this, and getting the customer where they need, who they need, what they need, in a very non-friction manner.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it'll be interesting to keep an eye on. A couple weeks back, we talked about the bot to bot conversations that will be happening. And I see that being a huge use case for this exact situation where, hey, I'm having a hard time getting this membership canceled. Can you go do it for me? And it'll become an automated process. So I think that will bring, shine a little bit of light onto those processes, and maybe they'll come to realize that maybe we are making this too difficult if 75% of our client base that is terminating their subscription is doing it through AI, because it's so hard to navigate as an individual, or just takes so much time out of your day and doesn't end up being any kind of a enjoyable experience for the consumer side of it.
But don't you think that's the intention, though, is to make it hard? I mean, that they're
Yeah.
intentionally making it hard so that you'll stick around for a couple of months. And and again, that creates bad blood as well. So anyway,
That's why,
on to the
that's why
next subject.
it's so easy to get to sales.
Yeah,
But
to be a
when
new
you're going
customer
to
is
the,
really
Yeah.
disconnect,
Hey man,
that's
everybody
that's a
knows that they figured it out pretty quickly. And then 50% of the sales calls are, well, you know what, I really have a problem with my account, right? I don't really want to buy anything, but I couldn't get through on the other one. There's a 55-minute wait there, and it's only 30 seconds here. So
yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Well, our next topic is a little bit more exciting. Gamify me, and I like the way this question is kind of posed. I think it'll be interesting to hear y'all's thoughts on it, because I know how we feel about gamification in the contact center agent world. But leaderboards, badges, and point systems are standard in modern agent desktops, and vendors cite engagement lifts. Critics say gamifying a stressful job for adults is a substitute for paying them. The agent grinding for a digital trophy at 4:55 on a Friday is either inspired or being trolled. So the question is, does gamification motivate agents or insult them? Michael, what do you think?
well, certainly the intention is to motivate them and to inform them and to make their job better. Does it insult them? I'm sure there are probably a bunch of gamification programs that are in place that do insult them, but it shouldn't. And the other thing that's, I don't know, I think something that we say all the time, which I just don't think is true, is that most people that work in a contact center, the job's not fun, right? They get their fun playing golf, or going to the movies, or watching Netflix or something else that they're doing. Their job in and of itself, especially if you're in a customer service environment where customers calling to complain, it's not fun. So gamification doesn't necessarily make it more fun. It just makes it different, and it makes it creative, and it makes it easier to go through what is normally a stressful, monotonous, difficult, sometimes mind-numbing job. And so we use gamification to be creative, to help them to see their performance, find different ways to learn, ways to get encouragement, ways to connect with a customer or with their fellow employees. We use all those things to try to create an environment that makes it more interesting. Potentially, it could make it more exciting. For those reps that are interested, it might be more competitive, or it might be more self-fulfilling. So gamification has great potential, but it's not a destination on its own, and it's not going to make up for a crappy culture, or frontline supervisors that don't know how to encourage, or don't know how to connect, or don't know how to engage. And it doesn't make up for a mind-numbing queue that never ends because you don't know how to schedule correctly and get people in their seats to create the kind of an environment that makes your contact center not a dumpster fire, but makes it a place that may be challenging, but also a place where I can learn and I can grow, and for whatever the length of season is that I'm in that particular job, it can make a difference. So, motivate or insult? The answer to that is probably yes, and unfortunately, probably many more insult than it should be. Where it should be more motivational and more just another tool that comes alongside and helps a difficult job be better.
Yeah, and I think you made a great point as to, the team member can tell if it's a substitution for a pay raise, or they can tell if it's actually being invested into to make their job more refreshing or better. Because at the end of the day, regardless of what you're doing in your industry, your most exciting time of the day shouldn't be 5:01 in the evening when you're clocking out and getting to head home, right? That should be a work-life balance kind of deal. So I think that's where gamification does have that opportunity to add on to the workday, help you get through it, make it more enjoyable while you do the tasks at hand. And Scott, what is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, the question, does gamification motivate agents or insult them? Just like Michael answered one of the other questions, the answer is yes, to both of those things. And again, it's how it's implemented. We've all been talking about this a little bit, but it can't be just a cookie cutter approach or just something you pull off the shelf and fit everyone in the contact center into easily. I mean, there's stats that show competition, for example, motivates about 10% of people, and then the other 90% just realize they're losing. So, that's not a great way to do it. I think you've got to be creative, and you've got to tie it back to performance and things that they're already paying attention to, so that there's a purpose behind it. It shouldn't just be surveillance. And some of the things we do, that I think are pretty unique is we even create gamification, and the agent might not even recognize or call it gamification. When we have a feature called My Start that gives a performance recap of an agent's performance from the previous day and just gets them prepared for their shifts. We might mention that they've had 10 perfect CSAT scores in a row, or 100, or 200. And when they see something like that, I mean, next day they're going to wonder, are they still keeping that streak? And they haven't really thought about it as a game, but it is something that can motivate, and it is something that most people would never have noticed in a contact center. And that's the other beauty of gamification, is it can really leverage things and look deep into call transcripts to identify things. We even have, something that drives customer experience, where people are just competing about how customers describe them in a call. And if someone says I'm excellent in a call, and Michael's customer says that he's awesome, I don't know who gets more points, awesome or excellent. I'll say excellent's worth more.
Awesome
So I get
gets more points.
And then, now we're competing in a friendly way, just one-on-one, not necessarily against the whole team, against just what customers are saying. So I think you've got to be creative. You've got to have purpose. The agents and employees have to understand what the goal is. And if the goal is to, kind of chop up that redundant, kind of boring but difficult day, to where you have some recognition and there's a little fun. And if you choose to, you can compete with someone as well. I think that's what's going to drive performance and get the retention improvement that gamification promises.
Yeah. And obviously, it's going to resonate differently per individual, right? Some people are motivated by those leaderboards or those stats or the quiet metrics that are presented to them. Other people, they're kind of pushed to the back of their mind and go head down onto the next call. But I think that what you guys are both explaining, the creativity side of it, or what makes it unique and change it up from just your normal day to day, is really where it can be leveraged and make a big impact for the agents. And
Uh,
moving on to our
I'm just
last
going to add
topic.
one thing, just
Yeah.
to throw it in there. Sorry, but just reminds me of something we used to talk about internally, which was, the golden rule: treat, people the way you'd like to be treated, and the platinum rule, which probably applies to gamification: treat people the way they want to be treated. So that's just a little tip for everyone out there who's taking notes.
I love it. The platinum rule. And I feel like all of us are very aware, but the contact center agents don't always get those kudos or the shout outs that they deserve. It is a monotonous and a redundant job, but they're the front line and they're the ones that are obtaining your retention or helping you acquire new clients, things like that. So taking the time to look into the tools that reinvest into them has just as much importance as it does on the C-suite level and all of that. So I think it's very, very important to keep in mind. And moving on to our last topic, as you know, on the rundown, we like to keep our seventh topic a little bit outside of the industry, something fun. So this week we decided to talk about LeBron's next chapter. For the first time since 2018, LeBron is a free agent after telling the Lakers he wants to play elsewhere for his 24th season. Rich Paul has been floating options publicly: Cleveland, Miami, Golden State, Philly, Minnesota, Denver, and even the Sixers. Exec Bob Myers made a live pitch for Philadelphia on Paul's podcast. LeBron himself is set to appear at Fanatics Fest in New York this weekend for a live taping of his own show, with speculation he could drop the decision while there. After 8 years with the Lakers, where does LeBron actually end up, and does it actually work? Scott, I'm going to let you take the lead on this one.
Well, look, this is going to be a pretty short response. I'll just admit, when I thought trust the process was a software framework when I first heard that said or read that, but and then I saw it was about LeBron, and I know Jules LeBron, who's an American TikTok influencer who kind of started the trend of very demure, very mindful trend, but that's not necessarily who we're talking about. And I remember one time Michael asking me, "Do I watch sports?" And I told him, "Yeah, I watch the TV show Survivor, and that's my my version of the Super Bowl is watching that final tribal council on Survivor." So I'm a little out of sorts when it comes to this particular question. I'd like to try to make stuff up, but I really think I'll hand this over to Michael and just you can snuff my torch, and it's time for me to leave the island. Let's just say that.
I love it.
Scott, when Karen brought up this particular issue, I couldn't wait to hear what you were going to say, because the Survivor story, I remember that like it was yesterday. So, but you know what? I actually have the answer that you really should give.
Yeah.
And because the real answer that you should give is, I don't know and I don't care. That's really the answer. And you know what? I do know. I do know, at least know who he is, but you know what? I don't know and I don't care either. And the reason I don't know and I don't care is because I'm a Michael Jordan fan. And for those that understand basketball, will understand that the discussion is over who's the greatest basketball player ever. And I'm definitely in the Michael Jordan camp. So that makes LeBron's, experience in professional basketball, first of all, it's spectacular, but it doesn't compare to Michael Jordan. So where he ends up this late in his career, I don't know. I'm a Celtics fan and a Mavs fan, so I guess I'd want him outside of that conference. If I could get him on the other side, that would be good, because he will help someone. But ultimately, maybe a year or two he's got left, and then he'll go on somewhere else. So we will wait for him to do that. And Scott, just want you to know, I've never watched an episode of Survivor. So there you go. Well, anyway,
I'll tell you, the Michael Jordan. Now, I do recognize that name because I think he was in a movie I saw. But I'll leave it at that.
Touche.
There you go. And I think my answer, I like the way you framed that, Michael, where it's I don't know and I don't care. I myself am also not a huge sports fan, but the names like Michael Jordan and LeBron, obviously outside of just sports alone, their work ethic and the way they are as individuals is something that everyone I think is familiar with. And I would selfishly say, what if we explore the idea of him coming to Houston? That's where I'm at. I think it would be amazing now that we've got Harden out of here. We could probably use it to take our team to the next level. And I think that I'd like to see a twist and where they're all kind of guessing on where he might land. So, it might shock the world if he were to land out here in Houston. And then I might have to go get some tickets and check him out on the court. So I think it'd be fun to see. But that's going to be a wrap for today's episode of The Rundown. Covered several topics, a lot of opinions, and hopefully there are a few worth bringing back to your team for this week. As always, if anything sparked a question or a debate that you're having internally, we'd love to hear it. Feel free to drop a comment, reach out to us on the Proponisi LinkedIn page, or give us a shout directly. And we'd be more than happy to keep the conversation going. That's the kind of feedback that we use to help pick these topics. If you found anything today valuable, make sure you share it with somebody in your world, whether a contact center leader, an operational director, or a trainer who's wondering where AI is going to mean for their job. These are all conversations worth having. Michael and Scott, always a great time hosting these with you guys. I appreciate you. And until next time, make today great, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Rundown.